Hi folks, welcome. Simon Dowling here, and this is episode 9 of Teaming with Possibility. So, in all the work that I do with teams, one of the most common questions, funnily enough, that I get asked, I reckon, would have to be, how often should my team meet? But I think that's fundamentally the wrong question. I don't think we should be starting the question how often, or where, or what catering we should organise. I think the better question is, why should my team even meet in the first place? And build from there. Design the frequency from there, the cadence of meetings from that purpose. This reminds me a little bit of a video I made a year or so ago, which you can find on YouTube, which I called You Are What You Meet, which was riffing on the old saying, you are what you eat. And I think for teams, it's the same kind of principle, that really the cultural fabric of teams is shaped by the way we spend our time together. When we come together, what is it that we do? And if I keep riffing on that idea of you are what you eat, so often meetings represent a diet of empty calories, a diet of bad meetings, bad times spent together, which is why I suppose people do keep asking this question. Because we intuitively know that when we come together as a group, whether it's online or in a room, whether it's as a whole or in smaller groups or even one-on-one, what we do in that moment really does shape who we become and how we feel about ourselves. You might like to check out that YouTube video. I'll post a link to it in the show notes. So I think the big question for every team and for you is, how do we know and how do we ensure whether or not we have a healthy, balanced diet of meetings as a team? In other words, what it is that we're doing in those meetings is healthy and balanced. Because of course, as with diet, when it comes to diet, calories aren't the thing that matter most. It's actually nutrition. It's the different macronutrients or the different things that you have in your diet that is much more important, because that's what enables us to be strong. It gives us energy. It gives us a sense of life force, and it ensures health in the long term. It's exactly the same here. It's not just about the time spent in meetings. It's the role that they play in strengthening your team. So in this episode, I think what I'm really keen to do is just explore a little bit what it means to create that balanced diet of meetings. And I would have to say, first up, that it would come down to a conversation or a reflection even on purpose. Are you clear, and have you started yourself with the question of meaningful purpose? Maybe pull out a piece of paper, or just in your mind now, or maybe pull out a notes app on your phone and start by asking yourself, what are all the really good reasons that we come together for a team meeting? And if you're the leader of that meeting, or if you're the leader of a project within the team, maybe don't answer that question through the lens of, what is it that serves me? What is it that I find helpful about meetings? But instead frame it through a different lens, which is, what do I think is most valuable and useful to the team as a whole? And I can kind of tell. I can tell by the look in their eyes, or I can tell by the energy of conversation it creates, or I can tell by the impact it has on the way that we work following on from that meeting, following on from that conversation. So that's, I think, the first question. What are those purposes? If you had to write down your top 5 or 6 purposes that you typically meet for, and then maybe even look at which of those dominate in terms of your meetings, I think that would be a really useful place to start. Perhaps even ask your team to help, or work together with your team to create that list. Like, what are the most useful things that we do when we come together as a group? What are the most useful outcomes that we generate? What are the most useful impacts? What's the most useful impact, or the most useful, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost payoff or ripple effect of meetings when we have them. So share an understanding of that. But then I think what you want to be able to do is to wash that up against an ideal list of purposes. In other words, this is where I almost think it's if you were thinking about your diet, it's useful to wash it up against a model of what makes for a healthy and balanced diet. You know, when I was a kid, we grew up with that idea of the food pyramid with, you know, the grains and pulses, vegetables down the bottom, and then your dairy in the middle, cereals, pastas, things like that, and then up the top you had sugar and refined carbs and so on. I can't recite it, but it's a little bit the same here, right? Like, what's your food pyramid? What's your ideal nutrient mix in the way and when you meet as a team? And so what I want to do now is, in fact, offer you a few different elements that I think you could wash your existing meetings up against. And I'll ask you at the end of this to have a think about, how does this measure up in terms of proportions right now? Like, where do I think maybe we do spend certain percentages of our time if we're coming together as meetings? If you had to split up all that time, how would you split up that 100 percentage points into your meeting time, and therefore your balanced diet? So the first of those is probably the most hollow of all calories in terms of meetings, the emptiest of calories, the consume this in extreme moderation. I wonder if you can guess what I'm going to be talking about here. It is information sharing and status updates. Information sharing and status updates. Now, there is nothing wrong with information being shared in a team. Don't get me wrong. There is nothing wrong with understanding where people are at in terms of their work, their projects, their activities, their tasks, their responsibilities, and so forth. So, just as I might say in the context of a healthy, nutritious diet, there's nothing wrong with the existence and presence of sugar in that. There's nothing wrong with refined carbohydrates per se, so long as they're in moderation. And that's going to be a principle, I think, through all of this. So, first element here is information sharing and status updates. How often do we come together to simply download something that's happened over the last week, or some information that I gleaned from an executive presentation that I was at, or a stakeholder presentation? Or how much time do we go through a list of responsibilities and work out what's red, yellow, and green, or who's up to what, and what have you done this week, etc., etc., etc. Now, often, I reckon the reason those dominate meetings is because the person organizing the meeting is treating the meeting as the easiest way to disseminate or complete that task. So if I've got information to share, well, I'll just wait till we come together in the team meeting. It's already an hour. It's already scheduled in the diary. So, I always wonder what we're going to do to fill that. So people will be interested to hear some of these updates I've got from the conference I was at. So we might just carve out 15, 20 minutes of that time for that. And so it's easy, path of least resistance, to use that format. Or same with the status updates. I think it's like, well, it would be great for me to have a sense of where everyone's up to as a team on different pieces of work. So let's just go around and do it when we're all come together as a group. So in other words, convening people is almost like I, as the leader of a team or leader of a project, am summoning people so that we can have this kind of group reporting process, because that's the most efficient use of my time. In other words, I'm completing my job as a manager, and you are ticking the boxes for me on that. But it's not necessarily mutually valuable. It doesn't really tap into the fact that we're all sitting together at the same time in a room, bringing our energy, our attention, our genius into this space. Therefore, we're not tapping it at all collectively. So when we think of information sharing, and when we think of status updates, could those things in fact be done outside the meeting? Like, could we in fact do them virtually? Like, if I want to share some information with you, could I just create a quick 5-minute video, or write an email, or do an audio recording and send it around to you so you can all listen to it on the way into the office, or whatever it might be? In other words, let's save time. And so when we come together, it's less about the sharing of it and more about the exploration of its nuance, its impact, and so forth. The technology is at our fingertips to so easily disseminate and record and do that sort of work in advance. Same with status updates. We have the technology so easily, readily available, to be able to understand where things are up to. Trello boards. Let's start just with a simple spreadsheet. Just people making sure they fill it in before we come together so we can look at those updates and talk about the nuance within them. So there you go. First element is, and check yourself already, what percentage of our time together do I reckon we spend on this most empty of calorie? And it's kind of like, it's addictive, it's easy to grab for, it's there at eye level on the shelf. There's too much of it in the pantry, so no shortage of it. Second purpose I would talk about is coordination. Now, again, very useful in itself, but could be really easy to spend way too much time on this piece. So coordination is kind of like if we've got 10 different people in our team, we've all got different roles to play in relation to a project or an objective that we're shooting for or whatever it might be. How do we coordinate our efforts? How do I make sure that the right people are on the right tasks, that people are contributing to each other's projects, we're useful, that we're sharing information and knowledge, that we're not reinventing the wheel where we don't need to, that we're aligning our efforts around reporting lines and so forth. So that is kind of coordinating all the moving parts so we don't duplicate, we don't cause friction for each other, we don't get in each other's way. I actually think this is a really useful and often underdone part of team meetings is if we have now the info shared and if we now have the understanding of where everyone's at on particular pieces of work, now we can look at us all and say, what's the best way to use our collective effort, our collective resources, our collective energy as a team? So, that might be, as an example of which, a team regularly, maybe this is once a week as part of your team meetings or stand-ups, asking the question, what is one thing that each person in this room would like or can imagine needing some help with this week? What's a question that you might be sitting with that you think you're going to need to wrestle with? And therefore, how do we align ourselves to best help you with that? Or where's a sticking point or a likely friction point on a piece of work right now? And then we look at ourselves and say, who can help with each of those things? So we're looking for opportunities to add value to each other's worlds, whether that's bringing a strength, whether it's simply giving you some of my time, whether it's opening up information that you'll need. Even just being aware that the traffic is coming in my direction can be really powerful. So that is the effort of coordination. Next purpose. So third purpose I want to look at is connection, and I'm going to bundle with that alignment, connection and alignment. And I think coming off the back of, all the lockdowns, the working from home and the, avalanche of online conversations, this is one that a lot of people felt got missed in the rush to be as effective and efficient and coordinated as possible on transactional stuff. What we ended up then skipping for a long time was just time connecting with each other. Now, connection, of course, could be simply about, hey, let's just understand where each other's at. Where's your head at right now? What are you struggling with? How you feeling? Tell me a little bit about what's going on in your world. So that's just understanding and connecting to each other as human beings. But I bundle together with this alignment because I actually think often some of the most powerful kind of team connection happens while spending time on conversations about alignment. What do we want? What does success look like for us? Where do we want to be in 12 months' time from now? What does that require of us? What does that look like over the next 90 days? What does that require of how we work together and the way we, hand over to each other, or the team dynamics, or even our cadence? Sometimes those conversations are incredibly powerful to create connection, because what they're doing is they're not just saying, let's have small talk in the hope that we feel more comfortable in each other's company. What they're doing is they're saying, let's get to a place where we share this picture, this mental model of what being a great team for us is really all about. What are we here to do? Let's get excited by that. Let's pump that conversation right up, because it's not just a logical, rational planning conversation. There should be some heart in it. There should be some feeling in it. And that, I think, brings us right back to that idea that connection is often deeply strengthened while we build this fierce alignment. Alignment for me is sometimes best represented by when I look at those in my team and we're talking about a particular goal or aim, I can sort of see the whites of your eyes, but I can also see the fire in your eyes and go, yeah, this is exciting, isn't it? Like the idea that we might actually be able to shift the way another team in this business thinks of us and engages with us on some of these client projects, so that they actually bring us to the client conversations and we're part of that from the beginning. That's exciting. That's what I want to be able to do. or the fact that we might actually be able to help some of our newer leaders in the business really set clear expectations with their own teams and be able to, have a strong sense that everyone is aligned around those expectations. Ooh, if now I'm in like a people and culture role, that's really exciting. Yes, let's do that. And now let's have a conversation about what that's going to take for all of us. How do we work together on that? Now I'm feeling not just aligned around a purpose, but connected to my team, because it feels like we share a mission. We have this collective vision of what it is that we're here to do. And I think in the context of teaming, that is sometimes underestimated. So how strong is this third element in your own diet of meetings? And that is connection and alignment as a really deliberate purpose and a deliberate thing that you spend time on. So there we have 3 so far. So let's just quickly recap the journey because we're halfway through my list. First is information sharing and status updates, probably the sugar, the refined carbs in the meeting diet. The second is coordination, which is spending time aligning efforts and resources. And now the third we've just talked about is connection and alignment. Let's have a look at the fourth, which is problem solving and idea generation. So problem solving and idea generation, it's all about saying, hey, we've got issues, we've got challenges, we've got problems, we've got opportunities, we've got roadblocks, we've got friction. And you know what? No one of us is qualified or positioned to come up with the best way to deal with this. Even if one of us tried, we probably wouldn't get there, or we'd have some, second-rate attempt to get there. So let's put our heads together, our collective genius, and weave some magic. And this actually last episode 8, if you haven't yet checked it out, go back and have a listen and talked all about. This is actually one of the most essential skills, I think, for teams, which is the skill or the muscle even of co-creation, and understanding that co-creation is very different from parallel play. So have a think about how often we spend time in really purposeful ideas generation. So and it's very easy here for teams to go, yeah, we do ideas generation. We got a whiteboard and a flip chart paper and some post-it notes, and we went crazy for an hour, and then we walked off and went, wow, that was fun. But actually, to do this well, I think it needs to have a really clear question at the heart of it. How do we get from X to Y? How do we overcome problem B? How do we? And we put that shared problem right at the heart of it and say we collectively are trying to solve for that. Let's give ourselves a time. Let's dive in and let's see what we come up with. And that's super powerful, particularly if it's now coupled with the next purpose in our food pyramid, our meeting pyramid, which is decision making. So if purpose 4 was problem solving and idea generation, which I've kind of bundled together because they're a very similar energy and intention, which is co-creation. Now we're talking about how do we and when do we as a team actually spend time making decisions. And let's be really clear here now that problem solving and idea generation doesn't have to be kind of premised on the idea that this team also will be the one making the decision. Like maybe there's a smaller group of people in this team who will make the decision of what we do. Maybe we set up a subgroup on that. Maybe it is an individual person who has the decision-making rights, but that's different from generating the ideas and the solutions and the creative conversation. The problem solving and idea generation is really all about. But it still, I think, allows us as a group to say, so when do our meetings actually become about making some decisions about something together? And if you ask me, teams that lack genuine decision-making, joint decision-making on certain things may be lacking some agency as a group. Like, what is it that we collectively do as opposed to what is it that we individually are doing that serves our chief decision maker? So yeah, we collectively may not have the opportunity to shape company strategy, but we could make some decisions about what are the most critical messages that go into some of our marketing material, or the most critical features that we want to highlight over the next 6 months in our new product, or what is the best sequence or the most important set of stakeholders that we should engage with on this project over the next 6 months? Or what are the top 3 skills mindset shifts that we're looking to make as a team. Let's decide that together and own it as a group. And joint decision making doesn't have to mean unanimous decision making. It doesn't have to mean consensus. So learning as a group how to be able to make decisions that don't always get resolved through consensus or unanimity. That's a hard word, unanimity. I think that's key. But again, check your diet. How often, when do we ever as a team actually make a decision about something? That could even start with where we're going to have our end of year celebration this year. Like, are we going to, which bar are we going to go to? What activity are we going to conduct? Are we going to have and include friends and family at it or not? Just some core decisions like that. Put it into the team. I think what I love about that is it says, hey, we have collective ownership about some stuff here, not just individual ownership. Okay, so that's the fifth. So fourth and fifth were idea generation / problem solving, and then decision making was the fifth one. Now let's look at number 6. Drum roll, please. Number 6 is growth and learning. When do we dedicate time to come together to better understand ourselves, better understand our context, better understand what's going on around us, better understand the impact that we're having on each other and on the rest of the business and on our market or customers or whoever it might be? So that starts with self-awareness. And from that to say, how is where we are now different from where we want to be? What we're trying to get to? And then what do we need to, how do we need to develop? How do we need to grow collectively to do that? Is that about a skill? Is it about a way of thinking? Is it about a shift in the kind of conversations that we have with people? How can we help and learn from each other on that? Or who do we need to bring in to help us learn and grow on that? What does that learning process look like? And I think for a lot of teams, often the tick that they put against this box, growth and learning, actually would be better put in the first bucket I talked about, which is info sharing. In other words, someone comes in and says, I'm going to present some slides on what's going on and some industry trends and blah, blah, blah. But there's very little evidence that the team is actually growing or learning from that. They might be politely listening, but they haven't really integrated that information to go, what does that mean for us? And how does that change the way we operate? And how is that going to change the way we hold each other accountable to that kind of shift? So there you go. Growth and learning, a huge bucket in itself. We could have a whole episode on each of these 6. But I think this is a really useful checklist for you to think about and to wash up against your own cadence of meetings. So rather than asking that question, how often should we meet? Instead, to ask the question, how much of each of these 6 things do we need? How much of these do we need, and how does that compare with what we've currently got? So how much info sharing and status updates do we need? How much coordination do we need? How much connection and alignment do we need? How much problem solving and idea generation do we need? How much joint decision making do we need? And finally, how much growth and learning do we need? And yeah, there's overlaps between those 6. But now let's design for those purposes and make sure they're clearly present in different elements of how we meet. So there's your macronutrient breakdown, your food pyramid of meetings. I hope that's useful. And I wonder if you sat down now and did a percentage split on those 6 and you said, over the last 90 days, say, over the last 90 days, what percentage, how have these factored into each of our, or all of our meeting times? What do you reckon it would split at? Sit down and do that. It's a really useful piece of self-awareness to do. And then kind of indicate the ones that you're looking to dial up, spend more time on, less time on, or the ones that you feel are about right. There's perhaps one or two last things to say about this. The first thing that comes to mind is it would be easy once you hear those 6 to go, okay, I now need to design this kind of 12-course banquet that accommodates for all of those things, which suddenly means my first question to you, Simon, how often should we meet, has suddenly become, we should just permanently meet. We should spend all of our time together because we'll never have fully satisfied the expectations of people across those 6 purposes. And that's definitely not a helpful way to think about this. I think, yeah, it would be great to sit down and gorge on all 6 of those, or maybe not all 6, but some of them. That's not useful. I think snack size bite-sized is much better. So do it in short chunks, which is why I'm a huge fan of time boxing. Like, yes, it would be great to do some joint problem solving and idea generation. This question we've put at the heart of it, like what are our opportunities to create some efficiencies across the different projects we're running so that we can bring costs down? Okay, we could spend 6 hours on that conversation. But maybe let's challenge ourselves and to say, what's the half-hour version of that? What could we come up with in half an hour? And if we're going to do that, meal prep is everything. If you forgive me coming back to the same metaphor, meal prep's everything. We've got to spend some time in advance thinking about, well, how do we, A, get people thinking about that question in advance? How do we share some information to help them think about it in advance? How do we collect some of those insights and ideas in advance so that if we time box ourselves and say, it's just going to be 30 minutes, we can really make the best possible use of that time rather than spending half of it or more just trying to build into it. So prep. So everything in moderation, time boxing, allocating your time. I'm not banning info sharing and status updates, but I'm saying push it offline, do it asynchronously, to use a common expression you hear these days. Do it asynchronously. We're not all together at the same time. Take advantage of the technology so that we use our time together, our meetings, for much more nutrient-dense purposes, much more enriching and strengthening purposes. So, how's your diet of meetings? Is it balanced or not? Have a play. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. That's pretty much it. Although what I wanted to say before we wrap up is a quick favour. If you find this episode, or if you've listened to some of our other episodes and you're finding them valuable, please do hit that subscribe or follow button. Send a signal to the universe that there's some valuable content here, and that way our podcast channels and YouTube will make sure it gets in front of other people as well. Leave me a comment. Love to hear what you think, a rating. And if you would like to get in touch at all, I love hearing from you. Thanks for those that have reached out already. My email address is podcast@simondowling.com.au, and that's where you can send through your feedback, your thoughts, your questions, things you'd like me to explore in future episodes of Teaming with Possibility. That's it from me for now. Hope you are going to have a great couple of weeks, and I look forward to seeing you or speaking to you in the next episode. Bye for now.